Hello, zoinks, jinkies, and jeepers to all you meddling kids out there.
I'm Alice.
And I'm Ross.
And this is the K-Ghoul Scooby Reviews podcast. So yeah, we're two people with too much time on our hands, and we love Scooby Doo.
I dare say it's been a founding pillar of our relationship.
Founding pillar, joint madness, if you ask my parents.
Unhealthy obsession. Yeah, one of them anyway. Yeah, quick disclaimer before we get into the meat of today's discussion. Despite the largely family-friendly nature of the Scooby franchise, we can't guarantee this will always be a family-friendly podcast. In regard to today's topic, you can expect a bit of language, a few allusions to weed jokes and sexy stuff, so listener discretion advised and all that. So, with that disclaimer out of the way, Alice, what are we talking about today?
Today we are doing a retrospective of the live-action 2000s movies, so, now all the sexy stuff is obvious.
Indeed, but put a pin in that, we'll get there.
We'll get there.
Now, you did mention to me recently, and I agree, these movies are probably more popular now than they have ever been before or ever will be again.
Oh, God, yeah. Every time I go on YouTube or Twitter now, it's like there's someone raving about them in some way, whether it be, I even actually this morning when I was just on YouTube saw someone last night had posted a video essay about something like Scooby Doo, the perfect, or the exception to, or how to make a perfect cartoon adaptation, or something like that. So yeah. And yeah, I guess it's a level of just 20-year nostalgia rule. All the kids who watch them are now grown-ups, and they can, more loudly say, hey, this movie was great, reevaluate people.
Yes, you're absolutely right. The 20-year nostalgia rule does apply. It crops up a lot. The 30-year nostalgia rule also applies to other things, like how in the 80s there was a bunch of pop culture around the 50s, or set in the 50s. The main examples coming to my mind are like Back to the Future and is Dirty Dancing set in the 50s?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, never actually seen it, but
it does feature a song that was from the 60s. It's a weird movie from what I remember, but it has Patrick Swayze, so who cares?
Interesting. Anyway, so there's that, and of course, like in the late 2010s when Stranger Things dropped, that kind of kicked off a wave of 80s nostalgia, which the at the time new adaptation of Stephen King's It, they kind of recontextualized it so that the section with them as kids was set in the 80s rather than the 50s, whereas in the original book, which came out in the 80s, that section was set in the late 50s, so let's see where we're going with this. But yeah, 30-year and 20-year nostalgia, they're a powerful thing.
Indeed. Also funny that Ross mentioned Stephen King. Aside from Scooby Doo, that's one of his other big obsessions, and we'll talk about one of my other big obsessions later in this.
That's true, yeah. In a way that's more relevant to these movies, but I'm sure. Is there another Scooby property we can link back to Stephen King somehow?
The Witch's Ghost. Ravencroft is definitely like Stephen King-esque.
Indeed, we'll put a pin in that for a future episode. If you have more than a passing knowledge of these movies, or have watched them since you were a child, you're probably aware that that they were written by James Gunn, who has certainly become like more Hollywood prolific in recent years. He wrote and directed the two Guardians of the Galaxy movies. The third one is still due to come out. The two Guardians films so far are the best MCU movies, and I will fight anyone on that. Thank you very much.
I'm not disagreeing.
Yeah, good. Of course, recently he also did the Suicide Squad.
So yeah, he's playing Marvel and DC.
He's a powerful man, but no, he's undeniably like a very fun and very smart, creative individual with his own sort of flair and stamp that he often puts on stuff. And yeah, I think I don't know if he'd worked on much when he did the first live action Scooby Doo movie.
Yeah, it could have been more like his underground, like what do you call it? What's the Romeo and Juliet kind of Brooklyn thing?
Yeah. I don't know enough about that, but like it's...
Me neither.
But it was very much sort of in the early days of his career, is my point.
Yes.
And he, obviously he didn't direct those movies, which is kind of a shame, because like he's proven himself to be a great director since, and like, no disrespect to Raja Gosnell, by all accounts he does fine he did fine with those two movies, and we still enjoy them, but it's, knowing now what a talented director James Gunn is, as well as a writer, it's just like, man, like the issues that we do have with those movies, you feel like they wouldn't be the kind of issues they are if he'd had the director's reins as well.
Agreed. Yeah. If only I could live in that reality.
Yeah, maybe that reality wouldn't also have an ongoing pandemic, but we won't go there. Anywho, on to less bleak topics at hand. So we were able to dig up a few interviews with James Gunn.
Mm-hmm.
One which he did, at the time when the movie was sort of still in development. Derek McCaw of Fanboy Planet asked him, a few questions, but most notably, he asked Gunn what he considered to be the essence of the Scooby Doo mythos, to which Gunn answered, the first show, Scooby Doo, Where Are You?, which began in 1969, and the second show, the new Scooby Doo movies, the ones with all the famous guest stars, are the two shows I consider the real Scooby Doo, and are pretty much in continuity with the movie. A friend of mine, a David Bowie fan disappointed with his later work, told me she believed David Bowie died right before the second side of Scary Monsters and was replaced with an evil clone. The same could be said of Scooby-Doo when Scrappy showed up. Now, aside from the fact that that does kind of set the stage for how Gunn would handle Scrappy in these movies, it's very telling that, he sort of lives and dies by, the original series and its immediate follow-up that way, which is... You can definitely see that. I would argue more so in the second of the live-action movies.
Yeah.
Which is straight up like a love letter to the cartoon in many ways.
Oh, yeah.
First one, while obviously we still have a lot of fun with it, there's more of a sense of battling creative visions in that, which, there are reasons for, which we'll get to. But, what do you think? Does his love for the original properties show?
I think so, yeah. I have certain thoughts that more relate to characters, which I'll get into later, but yeah, I think you can definitely tell that there is a lot of thought put into how to adapt these characters to make them, 3D people in a way that doesn't feel completely contradictory to what we do see in the cartoon, and the kind of goofy humor, the references, this does feel like he understands, he's not approaching it from a cynical place, which I think is probably another reason why these movies have held up better than perhaps other things that, when, I don't know, stuff like Garfield got made down the line. Yeah, right, true.
I enjoyed the Garfield movies as a kid, but, they're probably not very good. But, yeah, no, that's fair, absolutely. There is such a kind of level of sincerity to these movies, and I think that's always been sort of a staple of Gunn's writing, from what I've observed, this really kind of careful balance of sincerity and cynicism. You see that in the Guardians films, you see that in, the Suicide Squad, which came out this year, and, you can see it in his more kind of passion project indie movies as well, like Super, which is a movie I really enjoy, as it is a profoundly screwed up movie in many ways, but it is a James Gunn passion project through and through, and it for as gruesome and violent and upsetting as it is for a lot of the runtime, there is actually a pretty strong emotional core through it as well, so that balance of cynicism and sincerity has always kind of been very prevalent in his work, I think.
Yeah, I'll take your word for it on Super. I have seen it, but it's been a long time and I don't remember much.
It's very good, honestly, but anyway. So, yeah, as far as, how James Gunn approached the Scooby-Doo movies, they do kind of have an interesting production history, particularly the first one. it's noteworthy that it came out, or presumably it would have started development around like 99, 2000, and of course in 1999 American Pie came out, and which made Hollywood kind of low-key obsessed with raunchy teen sex comedies for a while, and that lasted throughout a large portion of the early noughties, I believe.
Yeah, and probably into the late noughties and maybe early 2010s when the trend should have died, but
Well, yeah, that's another issue. So, and yeah, apparently James Gunn's original pitch for the first film was supposed to be a lot raunchier than what we got. It was going to be, he pitched it as a PG-13 movie, which is, like a 12 or soft 15 over here. But supposedly it would have actually got an R rating, which is 18 or hard 15 equivalent.
Yeah.
And in an interview with Vanity Fair in 2017, he sort of shed some light on this and said, "I had written an edgier film geared towards older kids and adults, and the studio ended pushing it into a clean-cut children's film. And yes, the rumours are true. The first cut was rated R by the MPAA, and the female star's cleavage was CGI'd away so as not to offend." Was it?
How low cut were their outfits before? Because
I'm just going to assume they had their tits out. Because... yeah, like they still got away with some fairly cleavage flaunting outfits, especially in the first one.
Yeah, I mean even before like they get taken over by the monsters, like Daphne's got a very deep V-neck. That's all I'll say.
Yeah, which admittedly that may have been partially capitalizing on the appeal of Buffy in the cultural consciousness at the time, which leads into your obsession, which we alluded to earlier.
Yeah, I mean, my brain is basically 45% Scooby Doo, 45% Buffy, and then the other 10% is just the things I need to do to survive.
I respect that. But, yes, obviously Sarah Michelle Gellar, Buffy herself, played Daphne in these two movies. And, yeah, the cast... we'll talk more about the cast later, but they're great, is all I'll say for now.
Yes.
But, yeah, now according to this article from Vanity Fair, in another comment, Gunn clarified that the R rating wasn't due to any surprisingly adult plot lines, but rather some line of dialogue the MPAA thought referred to oral sex. Which is, I mean... aside from the fact that it's quite funny, the notion that it was literally just one joke that would have made the movie R-rated.
Yeah.
It's... like, for the amount of other jokes that they got away with, even in the final cut of the film, which was quite sort of studio mandated or meddled, you might say. There's the low cut tops and there's the less than subtle allusions to Shaggy's puff puff habits.
Look, guys, I know I'm just the dude who carries the bags.
I'm sure you are, buddy. And let's not forget, I'm Mary Jane. Like that is my favourite name.
Or of course, them in the van cooking burgers. Cooking burgers.
Yes, we hear them giggling and see smoke rising out of the Mystery Machine's sunroof, and we hear Shaggy say, "Oh man, talk about toasted."
Amazing.
Yes, I mean, credit to James Gunn, and presumably to Roger Gosnell and the editing team as well. Like, they, for as much as Warner Brothers got their hands in and went, "Oh, no, we want to make this a family movie," it is, for all intents and purposes, still a family-friendly film. I mean, I watched it loads as a kid, as I'm sure you did too, but they still snuck in a lot.
Yeah, like the weird jokes are sort of... they're kind of... if you know, you know. Like, they're kind of subtle enough that they will go over a young kid's head. But, parents or any teenagers forced to take their younger siblings along will know what's going on.
Oh, for sure. And, part of the joy of revisiting, childhood favourites as an adult, assuming they still hold up, is noticing the little jokey jokes that they snuck by you.
Although in terms of sex jokes, there is a thing in the first movie where, I don't know, apparently Fred told Shaggy he should have studied French, but Shaggy's reply is, like, you don't need to know what voulez-vous coucher avoir droit means to love that song.
Yeah, again, like, that went over my head as a kid.
Yep. Also, if any French speakers end up hearing this, I apologise. I studied German. Blame the British education system. And then I guess also another thing in terms of what Gunn's plans were, ones that did go sort of a little viral, I think last year. Velma being gay.
Yeah, I mean, like, look, if you're a long-standing fan of the Scooby franchise, and especially if, like us, you're of the LGBTQ plus persuasion, you're probably aware that Velma's been kind of gay-coded for a while.
Yeah.
And it's, last year, I believe it was, as you said, it was actually one of the showrunners of Scooby Doo Mystery Incorporated, the best Scooby property,
Yep.
which we will be talking about on this podcast in the future, if all goes well. But it was one of those guys who confirmed via like an Instagram post for Pride Month that their version of Velma was always intended to be gay. Now, put a pin in Mystery Inc. Again, we'll talk more about that in a future episode. But, James Gunn sort of bounced off that and sort of tweeted in response around the same time. He said, "I tried. In 2001, Velma was explicitly gay in my initial script, but the studio just kept watering it down, becoming ambiguous, the version shot, then nothing, the released version, and finally having a boyfriend, the sequel. Sad face." Which, like, I mean, yeah. She's very heteroed up in live action movies, but I'm not gonna say that there aren't still hints.
You go with your thoughts first, and then I'll share mine.
Okay. I mean, put it this way, at the beginning of the second film, when they're all kind of meeting, Mystery Incorporated are meeting all their fans at this sort of big community event that's being held for them, they all have their very specific kind of cliques of fans. Fred's largely got just teenage girls simping over him. Shaggy's got a bunch of obvious potheads. Daphne has what I'm going to assume are just a parody of insane, horny Buffy fans. And Velma has a little group of women who like they're definitely gay. Like put it
As
this
you
way.
put it, one of them has the Tumblr red and black hairstyle.
Pretty much, and sort of starts sobbing and saying "I love her so much" as Velma walks away.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's that, and there's little passing comments and moments between her and Daphne, which again, nothing concrete. It's all kind of subtextual. But in a flashback sequence in the first film, she, on top of commenting on how handsome Fred is, she also comments on how beautiful Daphne is. And there was a meme I sent you the other day which pointed out that Velma and Daphne's outfits in the second movie are just the walking lesbian flag. Again, like, I do sort of wish James Gunn had been able to put this into the mainstream a little more, especially in recent years, with more family-friendly media, actually allowing a bit more LGBTQ representation. The Mitchells and the Machines being a recent example. Shows like I believe Steven Universe and She-Ra have had a bit more ample. And Adventure Time, the most obvious example.
Yeah.
So yeah, like in recent years, we've definitely had more, queer and LGBTQ representation in family-friendly media, and I don't begrudge James Gunn, for it by any means. I think, for the early 2000s, he probably got away with as much as he could have, but yeah, I think he still snuck a few hints in, which I appreciate. What do you think?
I don't disagree with anything you said. I think my thought was, before we were filming this podcast, recording this podcast, because we're not on camera, which thank God we're both in our dressing gowns right now. We rewatched the two movies, and there were elements where we kept being like, is that a gay thing? Is that a gay thing? Like, there's a bit when they're in the first movie where they're all in the sort of broken down castle roller coaster ride, and Velma scares Daphne, and she says something like, "Well, I just wanted to scare the patootie out of Daphne," and kind of tickles her sides. And you're a bit like, that's being friendly? Is that a leftover?
Yeah, I mean, Velma arguably getting a little too handsy there, but
Yeah.
but it's like, there's some flirty energy going on there.
Yeah, and then I guess in the second movie, right before Velma has her makeover, which I'm sure we'll talk about later as well.
Oh, shush.
The two, Daphne sort of crawling, trying to chase after scared Velma, and then they sort of find each other and they're like face to face.
Yeah.
It's a little like...
So many people have screenshotted that and just, kind of squeed over it on Twitter since.
Oh, yeah. I don't know. I feel like maybe Gunn was able to put some things in there, but they're definitely not...
There's nothing explicit and in text. It's all kind of subtextual if you're looking for it.
Yeah, and I think you do really have to look for it. Like, I think being generous, maybe you could say Gunn wrote some coded things, but I don't think they were necessarily directed that way. So
yeah, that's fair. I would say.
I mean, I'd say compare it to Mystery Incorporated with Velma and Marcy. You'd either have to be very, very young or quite dense to not realize what they're going for.
Mm.
Here, you could easily, if you're not looking for it, you could easily just not see anything.
Yeah, true. I mean, I didn't as a kid, I'll admit.
Yeah.
But there's still like a lot of fun little tidbits, and I think I do sort of wish that James Gunn could be given like the writing and directing reins on a Scooby Doo movie now, because again, like a post Guardians of the Galaxy James Gunn, again striking that right balance of cynicism and sincerity, which I feel would kind of be the perfect tonal balance for a modern Scooby property in many ways.
Yeah, agreed.
Obviously, there's been a lot of recent discourse about pre-established properties bringing more of that kind of representation in. DC have been quite good with it recently. Tim Drake and Robin and the
Superman and Lois Lane's, or Clark Kent and Lois Lane's son.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember his name. That's really bad. But the new Superman, anyway, like they've both been confirmed as bisexual, and yeah, considering that Warner Brothers is so heavily affiliated with DC, you'd hope that if James Gunn brought a new Scooby-Doo script with an explicitly gay Velma to them now, especially now that Gunn is more of an established name in Hollywood, that they'd let him have a bit more free reign with it.
Yeah, plus, I mean, Warner owned Cartoon Network, and they made a Bench Time, where we've got a same-sex kiss between Marceline and Princess Bubblegum, so
yeah,
it could happen.
Yeah, there's room to move forward there, I think.
Yeah.
So yeah, obviously, talking about all the subtext and Gunn's original plans, we should probably talk about the character and story stuff that sort of explicitly made it into the movies.
Yes.
You were saying before, like, Gunn definitely has had a good handle on how to, make these, let's be fair, quite two-dimensional templates of the Scooby Gang as they stood in the original show into kind of fleshed out, characters that, felt a bit more like real people that way. And there are some attempts at legit character arcs for them. I think, Daphne has sort of quite a prominent one in the first film.
And sort of carried over in the second one. It's
little
played
bit
down a little as we give Velma and Scooby and Shaggy more focus, but...
Yeah, Shaggy and Scooby's arc in the second film is legitimately great.
Agreed. Yeah. So I guess, we may as well start with Daphne.
Sure.
So in that, was it Geek Planet interview with James Gunn?
Fanboy Planet.
Fanboy Planet. Always cite your sources. But we did see the interviewer asked him if he had any ideas of who he would have liked to see play the characters while he was writing, and Gunn sort of says that's not really how he writes, which I feel is kind of interesting for Daphne in particular, because obviously Sarah ended up playing Daphne, and there are little moments where I'm like, that is like a Buffy line.
Honestly, like there are moments when what is it, like the kind of like endearing nonsense babble that's sort of been dubbed Buffy speak.
Yes.
Like there are definite moments of that, as notably in the first film when she starts kind of chasing up their initial mystery leads and sort of confronts the voodoo guy. When he tells her not to go into the castle, and I can't even replicate what she says, but she's kind of rapid fire, like, you told me not to go up to the castle, then I won't go up to the castle where you set a trap to catch me, unless you told me not to go to the castle. And in my head, I'm just like, you doodle, I do doodle, you do doodle too.
Yep. Also in the second film, she sort of is questioning Heather. What's her last name?
Heather Jasper Howell.
Heather Jasper Howell, that's it. And,
Alicia Silverstone's character.
Yep, but and is sort of thinking, oh, maybe she's actually behind this. Oh, but you want me to think that, but don't. And then I think she just said,
he's a him, which is her, which is you.
Oh, now I see your point in the group.
You're in charge of incoherent babbling.
Which I would like to think that is Gunn taking a dig at Joss Whedon. It probably isn't, but I can pretend.
Yeah, we can hope. Especially knowing what we know now about Joss Whedon, which is a shame, but we won't go there.
Yeah. And I think also you pointed out, what exactly did she say? We wrote this down.
In the third act, sort of build up to the climax of Scooby Doo 2, Monsters Unleashed, if you prefer. Fred faces off against the Black Knight, and you guys can take cap-wielding Mjolnir in Endgame as your sort of generation-defining geeky property moment. Fred tying his ascot around his neck the first time in the movie as he prepares to joust the Black Knight, backed by Bon Jovi's Wanted Dead or Alive. That's my cap-wielding Mjolnir moment, and I won't hear otherwise. Anyway. But yes, while Fred's doing this, Buffy faces off against the 10,000 volt ghost and says, "Taste the pain, Mr. Glowy Ugly Thing," which, honestly, that's just an unused Buffy line. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
that might as well be.
Yeah, and yeah, I guess in general, like, her casting feels very deliberate.
Very deliberate, yeah.
Yeah, whereas I'd say Lillard and Linda Cardinale are definitely hired because they are able to sort of replicate the characters in the cartoon form.
Mm-hmm.
Sarah is here because, if we're thinking girly kick-ass ladies, Buffy is probably one of the first who comes to mind.
Yeah, and I would also argue that Freddie Prinze Jr.'s casting as Fred is more comparable to Sarah's in that way, because the amount of late 90s movies he'd been in where he just kind of played a himbo or jock archetype of some kind is just like, yeah, he fits Fred.
Pretty much, just put a wig on him and we're there.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I will say, I think also, I guess in general there have been more conversations about how 2000s media portrayed women, Free Britney, and how the media scrutiny of things like that. I will say, I think the way that this movie handles Daphne is actually pretty good and has been a reason...
For the time, certainly.
Yeah, and I think it has made the movie age a little better than it could have, because it doesn't really demonize her or make her look stupid or annoying. She's just, she's a girly girl, that's who she is. She finds ways to be useful for the gang, and... Yeah, and you have Sarah Michelle Gellar, who was well-liked at that point. Well, she's still well-liked.
Still is, I would hope.
Well, yes, but, well-liked and still, working regularly. But yeah, it's not... it cares about Daphne, it's not just using her as a punching bag.
Yeah, whereas some of the deleted scenes, which I did kind of rinse on the DVD back in the day, do kind of portray her in a bit more of a dumbass light, which, one of the deleted scenes is... when they all arrive at the airport to head off to Spooky Island and are reunited after, is it 2 years have supposed to have passed?
I think so, yeah.
And they're reunited, originally they were supposed to be kind of brief flashbacks to Fred, Velma and Daphne all kind of, failing at their other careers, like Fred getting hecklers at his book tour and Velma in a self-help group and Daphne doing some martial arts training that ends with her backflipping and then getting stuck in a tree, to which her sensei says in Japanese to his associate, "Dude, this chick is hopeless." So, I'm not going to say that there weren't some laughs to be had in those flashback scenes, but like I think cutting them was the right choice ultimately.
Yeah.
Because they did. While admittedly it portrays all three of them as kind of failures, like there's more of a emphasis on clumsy, danger-prone Daphne, which okay, would have been in line with the original cartoon, but while Gunn obviously had a lot of fondness for it, there was a definite effort to evolve it into a modern setting.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think personally for what it is, I kind of like I like Daphne's arc in the first movie, and the kind of where it does kind of bleed into the second movie, where she thinks she's sort of found her niche, but there is definitely a way for people to pick at her insecurities.
Yeah, we weren't able to find as many resources on the second film, but we did find a couple of interview clips where Sarah Michelle Gellar herself actually touched on her perception of Daphne's arc.
Things are definitely changing for Daphne. She, in the first movie, was very, very insecure about who she was and what her place in the gang was. She came to realize, or so she thought, that her place was a superficial place, that although she could defend herself, that she was the pretty one, and that it's about that people like you, and it's a really important growing lesson to understand that you have to like yourself for other people to like you and accept you.
Her insecurities are more up front and centre in the first film, and while she overcomes a lot of that, in the second film, there's still a little bit of hangover, and she has to kind of accept herself and her own self-image more, as opposed to just kind of the first film, where admittedly it does kind of smack a bit more of trying to prove herself to the gang and to other people.
Yeah. But, I think, considering, you go back to the original cartoon, people always talk about how Daphne's the boring one.
Mm-hmm.
It's, it's a pretty good way to update the character, I would say.
The boring one or the hot one. And, I mean, personally, if we're going by the live-action movies, I believe... I mean, they're all hot, let's be real, but like, Velma is the main hot one for me, especially in Scooby Doo 2.
Well, on that note, shall we move on to Velma?
Suppose so. Yeah, what are your thoughts on Velma? Aside from the gay shit, which we already touched on.
Yeah, I think in the first movie, she definitely feels like kind of just what an adult Velma would be like, I don't think she's super fleshed out. She is sort of mainly used as the smart one who needs to be the one to solve the mystery. But
yeah, kind of the downtrodden cynic that way.
Yeah.
Which, to be fair, is very in line with a lot of the other ways she's been portrayed in cartoons.
Yeah, and in fairness, there are certain little things about how she in particular felt annoyed at how Fred treated her in the group. She was arguably the one putting in the most effort and was really the key to how the mysteries got solved. But whenever the press were nearby, he took all the credit because Fred is just, he's Fred.
Teamwork. I do a tremendous amount of teamwork.
Exactly.
Said in the cold open to the first film.
Yeah.
Which is a fun set piece, honestly. It's a fun way to open this little duology of movies. They have kind of a classic Scooby mystery.
Indeed,
there's some fun tidbits in there, and it is very much kind of a classic Scooby trap in many ways. Daphne's sort of doing the damsel in distress thing, which obviously is what she'll have to overcome.
Shaggy and Scooby are in a dangerous position because they're the ones who can run fast.
Basically. And it also features, noted early 2000s superstar Pamela Anderson, which you made the apt point that she, while it's very dated now to have Pamela Anderson pop up to thank them, she was more relevant at that point than Simon Cowell was when they put him in Scoob last year for some reason.
Significantly more relevant.
Yeah, and in many ways the opening scene does kind of lay the groundwork for a lot of their arcs. Daphne being, in her own words, over this damsel in distress nonsense. Fred needing to overcome his own ego and let the rest of the gang share the credit for busting the criminals, and Velma needing to come into her own and be sort of a bit more kind of confident and at the forefront of the mystery solving in her own right.
Yeah, so then I guess
Shaggy and Scooby don't really have an arc in the first film, I would argue.
Scooby learns what a sacrifice is.
Shaggy has That's his girlfriend, Mary Jane.
Oh my. Well, we'll get to Shaggy and Scooby later, but yeah. Nah, I mean, there is also that weird little tidbit about, I don't know if he's given a name, I just refer to him as Led Zepp Bad Facial Hair Guy.
Yeah.
Who he seems to just be there to make Velma less gay.
I think he's just credited as Velma's friend in the movie. I don't think he's actually given a name.
Yeah.
He's likeable enough, I guess. And
not Melvin Doo likeable, but...
No, Melvin Doo is the greatest sporting character in cinema history, and I will not hear any different.
But yeah, more meaty stuff to talk about in the second film, obviously.
I will say, actually, but before we move on to the second film, like, you know, while I do think the script in the second one is stronger overall, just in terms of, you know, funny lines and, for what it is, a pretty decently constructed kid-friendly mystery.
Yeah.
And again, like, there is some clever little writing tidbits in the first film. Two notable instances of planting and payoff, which you know, I noticed that Emil Mondavarius, Rowan Atkinson's character, at one point there's a throwaway shot of him just sort of, you know, scratching his neck in a very dog-like way, which, you know, foreshadows the reveal that, you know, this is actually a robot Mondavarius operated by Scrappy, who James Gunn made the main villain because, in his own words from the Fanboy Planet interview, I can tell you I hate the little motherfucker with all my heart and soul. So do with that what you will.
Yeah.
And you aptly observed, Alice, that, yeah, they actually kind of, you know, foreshadowed how they would beat Scrappy in the end.
Yeah, because when...
Shaggy's on a date with Mary Jane early on in the movie.
Yeah, like, they go to one of the claw machines and Shaggy's able to get her a toy. No one's ever given me a severed head before.
Which is also where we get the voulez-vous coucher avec moi line.
Yeah, but, you know, Shaggy establishes that he's super good at using that, and then the soul-sucking apparatus is also kind of shaped like a claw, and that's how he's able to get all the souls out of Scrappy.
Yeah, although prior to that, it does give us some kind of cursed imagery when you know, because the whole climax of the movie is centered around this sacrifice where Scrappy's trying to become like an all-powerful monster, and, well, Scrappy and the robot Mondavarius, whatever, and they need a pure soul to complete the sacrifice, which, you know, is Scooby. And there is a brief moment where they successfully yank Scooby's soul out, and which, you know, prompts Scooby's limp, lifeless body to just droop in the sacrificial chair. And I'm just watching it now, going like, Jesus, like, you can tell James Gunn has his roots in horror filmmaking.
Yep.
But yes, as you said, you know, the crane thing, you know, they use it to yank the Damon Ritus thingy out of Scrappy's chest, and all the souls, you know, pop out and return to their bodies. Yeah. So yeah, like some clever little bits of screenwriting and foreshadowing there, which, yeah, it's moments like that I appreciate, where it's just like, okay, like, Gunn put more effort into the script for this than he arguably needed to.
Yeah.
You know, again, his original vision was probably quite different, you know, raunchier, gayer, etc., but it's still, you know, I still enjoy his script, especially for the second film, which, as you say, let's get into the meat of that.
Yeah, so, Velma in particular, well, she gets a boyfriend.
Yeah, which, I mean, look, as we've established, I wish those movies had committed to Gunn's original plans and made her gayer, but they're a cute couple for what if we have to make Velma straight.
Yeah, I mean, and I think, oh god, what is Seth Green's character called? Patrick. Yeah, he has actually a pretty compelling character, and, like, you know, sort of,
unlike Led Zepp facial hair man.
Exactly. Yes, he has a name for one thing. And, you know,
he's set up as a legit red herring as well. There are like 2 or 3 well-established red herrings in the movie.
Yeah, but he is sort of, yeah, I mean, the admittedly quite suspenseful scene, the shrine to
Jonathan Jacobo, the OG pterodactyl ghost, who sort of factors into the plot.
Yeah.
More significantly than you think he will originally.
Yes, but when he sort of comes up behind Velma while she's not wearing her glasses, it is legit quite an intimidating and suspenseful scene.
Yeah, like, and I will actually give some credit to Roger Gosnell for that as well, because, you know, that's it's largely dialogue-free scene. It's all kind of relying on visual storytelling, aside from a couple of throwaway lines from Velma. But you know, the stakes are clearly established. You know, Velma's fallen down a chute and lost her glasses, so she can't totally see her surroundings. She's in this kind of spooky underground thing and like feeling around this shrine, not quite sure what it is. And then, yeah, you know, she stands up and we see kind of Patrick's hazy silhouette behind her, and it's just like, no, this is like, this is legit kind of horror filmmaking 101 here.
Yeah.
Like, credit where it's due. Like, Roger Gosnell, you did good.
Agreed. But yeah, I think there's also something quite nice in the way, you know, Velma has, you know, Velma's own insecurities and, you know, things she's not comfortable with, having to confront them, and, you know, her interest in Patrick isn't just, let's give Velma a boyfriend. There is actually some, you know, room for her to grow as a person.
Yeah, and there's some clearly established connection between them from the get-go. Like, she clearly also likes him.
Yeah.
Which, you know, you aptly observe that any time Sarah Michelle Gellar and Seth Green are in a geeky property together, he's into her nerdy best friend.
Yep, I'm convinced that's the only reason Daphne's there for the scene where we first meet Patrick.
Do you think Alison Hannigan could have played Velma in another timeline?
Probably. I'd like to think that's the same timeline where Charisma Carpenter played Daphne.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I think Velma's, you know, there is actually something, it's an arc that feels fairly realistic for the kind of character and archetype she's set up to be.
And it's quite nice, actually, the scene you mentioned between her and Daphne, where Velma's kind of crawling away, as we established that that Daphne had overcome a few of her own insecurities in the previous movie, so it's nice to see, you know, her a more secure, if still not totally self-realised Daphne, you know, offering support to Velma that way.
Everyone has flaws, Velma.
The object of a healthy relationship is to never let the other person know they're there. Again, as you said at the time, just when you think we've heard the best line in that movie, another one pops up. Other favourites being, we gotta make like your personality and split. And Peter Boyle grouchily saying, darn bushes yelling at me again. Also kind of ingenious casting in its own way.
Yes, I mean, you know, he played the monster in Young Frankenstein, and yeah, now he was a former monster in this movie.
Yes, the original Black Knight ghost in this movie's canon.
You know, that's maybe a side note, but I think a point in the second movie's favour is that the kind of more supporting cast and characters are more interesting in this one.
They are stronger, yeah,
I
definitely.
mean, I do think Rowan Atkinson's a lot of fun in the first movie, but there is this vibe of he's not trying very hard. Like, he's just kind of he's a lot more relaxed than I think he often is in some of his other movies, which is funny, and I think he is funny. But
he has some pretty amusing deliveries.
Yes.
I mean, I'm never, you know, I'm a big Blackadder fan, as you know, and you know, obviously a lot of love for Mr. Bean as well. So I'm never going to not be a fan of Rowan Atkinson's comedic delivery.
Yeah, agreed. But I'd say it's definitely one of his more subdued. You know, he's not trying, but still is great. I'm going to put it that way. Whereas, compare it to Scooby Doo 2, Peter Boyle, darn bushes yelling at me.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
Peter Boyle and Seth Green, in particular, actually legit pull some acting weight as well.
They really do.
Like not even just in the funny capacity. There's, like, some of the deliveries are quite dramatic, and there's, you know, there's a scene where after like all of the costumes are stolen from the museum exhibit, and Patrick is established that I think he's the curator of the museum.
Yes, yeah.
So, you know, he's obviously very upset by this and kind of snaps at Velma, and then is sort of visibly like, you know, sorry, I shouldn't have snapped at you, but I gotta go, as he kind of storms off. And it's just like, no, Seth Green kind of carried like the emotional upset of that scene.
Yeah. And,
you know, when Shaggy and Scooby, you know, in the midst of their own arc of trying to be more legit detectives, investigate the faux ghost, kind of a former villain-centric dive bar, you know, they encounter, you know, Jeremiah Wickles. You know, Peter Boyle, he has this mini monologue about how, because obviously Shaggy and Scooby have gone undercover disguised as costume creeps in their own right, and, Peter Boyle says something about like, get out of this gig while you still can. None of us here are anything to admire. And it's just like, ugh, movie, you're making me feel feelings.
I know, yeah. And well, damn it, Cher, why'd you have to do this to me? But well, I will say Heather Jasper Howell is sort of this sort of antagonist, and then turns out to be, the main villain, sort of.
Yeah.
I think Alicia Silverstone actually does bring the right kind of energy to it. Like, she's over the top, but not annoyingly so. Mm-hmm. And, there's a level of, wow, this girl is going to ruin your day.
Mm-hmm. And she definitely pulls off the bitchy reporter thing very well. And that movie, in hindsight, was probably my first exposure to, like, the idea that, the news can twist things, and not all media outlets can be trusted, and every platform has some kind of agenda to push, etc.
Yeah, and,
I think Coolsville sucks.
I didn't say that!
Don't record that!
Yeah, and, how they can run smear campaigns for people.
Mm-hmm. James Gunn.
Yes.
Yeah, and any of our listeners remember when, they tried to cancel James Gunn a few years back, and Disney briefly fired him and only rehired him after massive fan and Guardians of the Galaxy cast protests.
Yeah.
Because, like everyone with a Twitter account, he made a few edgy jokes in 2012. Big whoop, whatever. Like,
he had taken accountability for, so...
Yeah. Though on that note, I am very surprised that the Black Knight sort of bursting in on Heather Jasper Howell's newsroom in the second movie, which obviously turns out to be kind of a fabricated setup.
Yeah.
But, he bursts in and kicks the door down and goes, "Sorry, you're cancelled." How has that not re-emerged as a meme or reaction gif, especially around the time of the James Gunn scandal?
I have no idea. Come on, someone, gif makers, make that a thing.
Yeah, because, if I'm going to be cancelled by anyone, I'd want it to be the Black Knight.
Agreed.
But yeah, like there's actually, as you were saying, there's like a fair bit of meat to the second movie, like plot-wise and character-wise. And Scooby and Shaggy, like I alluded to earlier, they have a legitimately quite fun and heartfelt arc where the main villain of the movie, he, with the help of the quote-unquote real pterodactyl ghost, trash the museum and steal a couple of the costumes. Which, again, slight side note, all of the monsters that they go up against in the second movie are from the OG cartoon, except for the evil masked figure. But like,
and the cotton candy glove.
Well, yes, but like it's all of the classics. The Black Knight Ghost, the 10,000 Volt Ghost. Arguably an improvement on the original design, though,
Oh, definitely.
10,000 Volt Ghost in the cartoon is kind of cute and derpy. The 10,000 Volt Ghost in Scooby Doo 2 wouldn't be out of place in a legit horror movie, honestly.
No.
But yeah, it's all of those guys, Tar Monster, Skeleton Men, blah blah blah. Anyway, and I'm salty we didn't get a live action Space Kook. He might be my favourite classic Scooby Doo monster, but. Anyway, I keep getting off topic, sorry. but yeah, like, after the evil masked figure and the real pterodactyl ghost trash the museum, and where, all of the costumes that Mystery Inc. have, unmasked in the past are being put in a big exhibit, they steal a couple of the costumes, and Shaggy and Scooby kind of get caught up in the slapstick and perpetuate the destruction, and... over here, the rest of the gang talking about, we all know how Shaggy and Scooby can be, and which leads to them saying like, oh, we're screw-ups, we've got to learn how to be real detectives. Yeah, it does give some, like, pretty hilarious moments, like the immediate follow-up where they try and, dress fancy in preparation for solving a mystery. I'm sorry, Death, but your go-go boots didn't fit. Me?
Scooby? So don't go with that sweater.
Really? And we say Scooby was the non-binary icon the early 2000s didn't know it needed.
I am happy to say that Scooby is any kind of icon that the early 2000s didn't know it needed.
Good point. Though, I don't know, the the potions scene later in the movie where Shaggy and Scooby take all the potions. Shaggy growing boobs was probably someone's non-binary awakening.
Or possibly sexual awakening.
Yeah, let's not go there. I mean, Velma's glow up was mine, but I digress. But no, yeah. No, I legit like Shaggy and Scooby's arc.
Yeah, I think honestly it's probably second only to their arc in Alien Invaders.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I mean, it's really sweet, and, you know, you really do like the way they kind of really put a lot of work into it, even though they're still their bumbling selves in their own way.
Sure. And Velma sort of, and again, this is actually quite a nice follow-up from, a more secure Daphne reassuring Velma. In turn, towards the end of the movie, a marginally more secure Velma reassures Shaggy and Scooby and says, I always wanted to be like you guys. You're so free and, never worried to be yourselves. And it's just like, oh, that's nice. They're all supporting each other.
Yeah.
Fred, as you pointed out, is arguably the only one who doesn't have an arc.
In either movies, really.
I would argue he has a little bit of a one in the first film, whereby he just sort of lets his ego take a backseat and lets Velma take the centre stage a bit more.
Yeah, and I guess in the second one there's also, after they're sort of finally on a losing streak with the media particularly harassing him, it's like he, feels like he can't open up. Daphne tries to get him to talk, doesn't really work, and then, the great scene with the Black Knight goes, talking's not for wusses. You're just afraid to show off your sensitive side.
Oh, you've touched my inner child. And he's really mad!
Yeah, there's not a lot with Fred, but I don't know, in a way I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing, because...
He's always kind of been the blandest of the group, let's be real. Except in Mystery Inc.
Yeah. Or he's kind of... I think there is a level of, Fred is the good-looking guy who, at that point in his life, he's been rewarded a lot. The media always loved him. He got the most focus and the most credit. There is a level of... He's the one who doesn't need to change. If he doesn't change, his life's going to be fine. Minor self-improvements, yeah, we'll take it.
Good enough. So yeah, I mean, outside of the character stuff, I'd say the humour is pretty on point for most of the movies. I mean, we still get a ton of laughs out of it, and, I think there are some jokes that are just kind of dated early 2000s stuff, but...
DownlikeA.com.
Yeah, Fred says down like a .com in the second movie, which is not as egregious as him saying da bomb diggity in Scooby Doo and the Loch Ness Monster, which we may talk about in a future episode, but anywho.
But yeah, there is a lot of good humour. I mean, when we got to the fart gag joke in the first movie, we were hyperventilating with our laughter.
I mean, look, it's a fart joke, so it's kind of inherently childish by nature, but as I said in my Letterboxd review, I will give all the credit in the world to Matthew Lillard for his commitment to that scene. By the way, of all the core cast, they're all pretty great in their own ways. Lillard's the standout for me, by a pretty large margin.
That's not even a question.
There's a reason that he became the canonical voice of Shaggy for all of the subsequent animated Scooby Doo properties after Casey Kasem passed away. So
yeah.
But yes, he threw himself into that scene. You think about how that must have been to actually shoot. He's acting against a blank space which hasn't yet been filled by a CGI Scooby.
Yeah, at most he's looking at a tennis ball.
Yeah, there's probably no accompanying sound effects. If so, they'll be played over a very tinny speaker somewhere. And so really he's just acting against a blank space and just, pumping his arm and thrusting his ass in Sarah Michelle Gellar's face at a time when all of geekdom was still in love with Buffy. Daniel Day-Lewis who? I'm sorry, that's immersion in a role right there. And the first film does also I think the visual humour is stronger in the first film, but the verbal humour is stronger in the second overall, because there are a lot of visual gags in the first movie. One of my favourites is when they all meet at the airport and sort of reunite very awkwardly after their 2-year absence from each other, all the Mystery Inc. gang are sharing stories of what they've been up to, and Fred's been on a book tour. Fred on Fred, The Many Faces of Me, which has a hilariously poorly photoshopped cover, which is just like two of his face for some reason. Like, I don't know. But, like, in the following scene, there's a sort of mini montage of all of them on the plane, and for one shot we just see Fred just sitting there reading his own book and sort of looking weirdly into it, like, yes, I do make some good points.
Oh, God.
Like, I just find that very, very funny.
Yeah, or, you do have, when, they're doing their chant, which is totally a banger, and then Fred getting very into it, and then not realising that they've stopped.
Which, admittedly, does lead into some more cringy early 2000s humour when he tries, talking in kind of very street smart, like, yo, you're fucking up the second part of the dance we do with the electric slide, which, okay, it's meant to be cringe, but it's a little much.
Yeah. I mean, I was also trying to think about this while we were watching the movies. Initially I said that the second movie felt less painfully early 2000s.
Despite Baby Got Back playing when Shaggy sticks his head into the gramophone, which I swear was in, like, every early 2000s thing. There's a Baby Got Back joke in Shark Tale, that there's an entire Friends episode centered around it.
Yeah. But, yeah, I realised, actually, no, that's not entirely true. I think it's just, they're both very 2000s, but the second movie feels less 2000s in a corporate, put all these references in that the kids love. It feels a little bit more organic.
There's no Pam Anderson or Sugar Ray, put it that way.
Oh god, like when the guy from Sugar Ray jumps down at Daphne and...
Even as a kid I cringed at that, I'm sorry.
It's just, the frosted tips, Buffy is eyeing up the guy from Sugar Ray, nothing could be more early 2000s.
Honestly.
Well, there was one other thing we sort of pointed out, that like the set design in the first movie is really good, and then the costume design in the second one is really on point.
Yeah, agreed, and I think, again with the early 2000s stuff, like, they are, a lot of the costumes are, very much of the time, admittedly, but, like, especially in the second one, like, there are some legitimately fun modern updates on their classic looks. I mean, Shaggy is virtually unchanged, but bar, the white Mystery Inc. branded long sleeve he's wearing under his green t-shirt in the second movie. Scooby is a dog, so he's pretty much unchanged.
Really?
but yeah, you have Fred in kind of a blue sports jacket. You have Daphne obviously has kind of the most variations on her outfits for obvious reasons.
Yeah, I mean she's the, well, actually I don't know if she's probably rich in this version, and she just loves fashion. Yeah,
and there's a scene where she confronts Alicia Silverstone's character Heather Jasper, how she's wearing kind of a lilac power suit almost, which is quite nice.
Yeah. A little like the Zombie Island outfit she wears.
Yes, which is arguably our favourite interpretation of Daphne, but we'll certainly talk about Zombie Island in the future. If we ever wanted proof that, like, the Mystery Inc. gang are not entirely straight, towards the end of Monsters Unleashed, she has sort of a, I guess, kind of a purple, sort of a bomber jacket or like a puffy jacket of some kind.
Yeah.
But it's got a little rainbow on it in the sort of like upper breast pocket area, and just like, okay, like, she's literally got a rainbow on her jacket. Like,
yeah,
they're all pansexual polyamorous icons, and you can't tell me otherwise.
Exactly. Yeah. No, I think there is a level of these movies have a lot more care and attention and love than,
than they necessarily needed to.
Yeah, exactly.
For what were, for all intents and purposes, could have just been nostalgic cash grabs. And, I mean, I'm not gonna act like nostalgia doesn't play a big part in our enjoyment of these movies. Like, it absolutely does.
Oh, God, yeah. I mean,
they're certainly not very highly rated on IMDb and Rotten Tomatoes, put it that way. For what that counts for. But
or on Now TV's star rating when we watch them on there.
Disgraceful.
But,
like, I think while they're certainly flawed, and if I'm being... I mean, this is sort of an ongoing debate. Like, can you really say that art is objective, or can be judged objectively? Like, there are too many factors involved. You know, your own sort of life experience, media experience, worldview, and whatever. It's always going to influence how you react to certain pieces of media and certain things. And while I don't think these movies are, the Scooby Doo movies are by any stretch of the imagination flawless.
Nah.
Like, nostalgia goggles do play a factor, and there are certain things that would maybe be done differently now.
Yeah, I remember seeing a tweet a while ago that made me laugh. It was, someone said, the worst thing about getting older is seeing all these 20-somethings come on Twitter and proclaim the worst movies you've ever seen as masterpieces because they grew up watching them. Yeah, but, I mean, obviously, yes, okay, we admit nostalgia plays a part, but I think it's fair to say there maybe are certain things or, choices made in these movies that have had sort of a lasting impact on the franchise as a whole.
These films definitely have a bit of a legacy in the Scooby canon.
Yeah.
I mean, for one thing, like we already mentioned, Matthew Lillard became the sort of canonical animated voice of Shaggy. So yeah, he's sort of remained with the franchise since, and Linda Cardellini, Velma, even came back, not to play Velma herself, but to play Marcy, aka Hot Dog Water in Mystery Incorporated.
Yeah.
Ooh, and yes, all four of the main cast did come back for the Robot Chicken parodies as well, which was quite fun.
Which, yeah, that's definitely a lot of fun. Yeah, and, one thing, keeping on Mystery Incorporated, that I did notice, so at the end of the second movie of Scooby-Doo 2 Monsters Unleashed, when they sort of need to stop the machine, take down the big bad, all of them kind of they're all being drowned by the tar monster. First Fred gets caught, then Daphne, then Velma, who is lying on the ground and is about to drown. Like, that is kind of horrifying.
Yeah, like I said, you can tell that James Gunn has his roots in horror filmmaking and is sneaking a bit of that into these movies, and again, fair play to Roger Gosnell, he's leaning some of the direction into that.
Yeah. And then, Shaggy gets captured, and it's up to Scooby to sort of be the one to actually finally do the thing to...
You can't do this to me! Who do you think you are?
Scooby? Dooby? Doo!
Motherfucker!
Which, for the... Well, spoilers for Mystery Incorporated, they do that when they sort of take down the final boss villain. They're in the exact same order. Fred gets caught by henchmen or debris, and then Daphne, then Velma, then Shaggy, and
it's
Scooby.
Down to Scooby to deliver the final blow.
Which I think is a good way to do it, because honestly, that is a level of it's ending on the heart of the show, Scooby.
Yeah, because we talked a lot about sort of the four human members of the gang. We haven't talked about Scooby a whole lot, but like character and story wise, there's not much to him. Like, that sounds bad, but it's just he's never been. I mean, as a character, Scooby's, with the exception of maybe Scooby Doo 2 Monsters Unleashed and Alien Invaders, Scooby's never really had much of an arc per se.
Nah.
Maybe Mystery Inc. a little bit with his love interest, but he's remained kind of a constant, and which I guess works because he is sort of, as you say, he's the heart of the show and the heart of the property. The whole property is named after him, for crying out loud. But yeah, no, I think that's fine, and I think allowing him to have centre stage for the finale is kind of a nice way to hammer that home.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it's just a good way. It makes you feel. It's a good way to sort of pit them all off and separate them, because it does make you, as one character goes down and then another one you care about maybe slightly more goes down. It makes you feel a lot more tension, which is great.
Agreed.
It's a good, as a storytelling device, it's well done.
Yeah, and like I said, the screenplays for these movies, while the first one did suffer a bit more from clashing creative visions, and the second was maybe not what Gunn had originally envisioned, because Velma has a boyfriend, among other things. But like the screenwriting is actually for the most part quite on point with these movies, just in terms of understanding the characters, little bits of planting and payoff, and structural beats that work quite well, humor, both verbal and visual, and like not everything works perfectly, but it for the most part they are pretty solid stories for what they are.
Mm-hmm. And I can think of two things, but I'll go with a smaller one. I feel like there is a bit of an element of these movies kind of led Fred on a path to being kind of dumber, like he was in later things.
Yeah.
In a way. I mean, obviously, in a pup named Scooby Doo, when he's a literal child, he is definitely the dumbest out of the group.
Yeah.
But, it's like, who is smart as a kid? Little Velma, and that's it. But
basically.
Yeah, and then you see in sort of What's New, the sort of first series that would have happened after.
Kind of in conjunction with those.
Yeah, he is definitely kind of a dumb jock. Like, favourite line that had me spitting and choking on my Coke? My Coca-Cola.
Alice. My God. But, talk about weed on this podcast, not the other stuff.
But, episode where they're in France, and then they're on the Eiffel Tower, and there's some little telescope they can use. I'll use these dollars to look through the telescopes.
Velma chimes in, those are francs.
I thought they were mine.
It's just way funnier than it had any right to be.
And as you pointed out, it's technically still true, because Frank Welker is the voice of Fred.
Yeah, true.
But yeah, I mean...
And then in Mystery Inc., he's full himbo, really. Like,
oh yeah, I mean...
Like, weirdly, he does kind of... I mean, Mystery Incorporated as a show is maybe the only one that's given him a legitimately dramatic and emotional arc.
Yeah, I think probably true.
And by a pretty large margin, the most interesting Fred's ever been.
Oh yeah.
But in the early stages of the show, when it was sort of a little more in line with the traditional Scooby formula, he was. Yeah, he's full-blown himbo, jock, oblivious dumbass.
Yeah. It's great. But yeah, I think that has maybe been a thing that's carried over, because,
I feel like Daphne's been a bit more kick-ass as well in other iterations.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, I feel like I was saying how they got a, girly kick-ass icon to play her in these movies. I think in What's New they maybe took some inspirations from a different girly pop culture icon, Quinn Morgendorfer.
Yeah, true. Yeah, she's very fashion conscious in What's New.
Yep, and kind of over dramatic, and she's less annoying than Quinn can be, but there are some similarities.
So yeah, these movies have definitely had certain things that have carried through to the franchise as a whole. And one wonders if these things would have been increased tenfold if James Gunn had got to do his original planned sequel, because he was planning a Scooby Doo 3, which he also tweeted about, saying that the Mystery Inc. gang are hired by a town in Scotland who complain they're being plagued by monsters, but we discover throughout the film the monsters are actually the victims, and Scooby and Shaggy have to come to terms with their own prejudices and narrow belief systems. Yes, really. We were robbed. Because that's, I mean, I guess it's drawing on sort of similar ideas to Zombie Island, whereby, the monsters who you think are the initial threat aren't the main one, but it's, I mean, well, the zombies are still Confederate soldiers, but let's just gloss over that.
And murdering pirates, but
that too. Anywho, but I guess it's drawing on similar ideas to that, but the idea,
or maybe alien invaders as well, because the fake aliens are humans being shitty, and the actual aliens who've come there to sort of just research and see Earth, they're actually the good guys. And potential love interests.
Well, yes. So yeah, drawing on similar ideas, but sounds interesting in its own right, and potential for some good character growth too.
Yeah.
And yeah, you just think like, man, If only. But, so, I mean, you think Gunn would get back on board with another Scooby project in the future? The cast are obviously all too old now, at least for a live-action one, but maybe like an animated reunion of some kind.
Yeah. Depends on if Warner Brothers would let them do it, it's the question. Because I think Gunn would probably, now that he has more authority, he'd want more creative control, and Warner just seem to be a bit weird with what they're willing to let people do for Scooby as a property.
Well, they seem to be a bit weird with a lot of their properties at the minute.
Also true.
I say as someone who, at the time of recording this, is going to tune in for DC Fandom later today, so hopefully I get some good news there. But, anywho. But, yeah, I think, in terms of creative control, we did dig up another interview clip from Scooby Doo 2, which sort of cemented that they were able to have a little more free reign with certain things, and everyone was clearly kind of settled into the roles more, which I guess is why the team dynamic feels a lot more organic.
Yeah.
Because it's with Matthew Lillard and Neil Fanning who did the voice of Scooby for these movies, and Neil talks about sort of actually talking to the director and sort of Roger Gosnell, who would apparently give him a lot of freedom in how Scooby might react or what he might say in certain situations.
I go up to Raj, the director, and say, I think Scooby would react here. I think he's going to have to say something here. There's a big gap. And he would just say, look, you just do what you do. And we were able to work off each other, and it flowed really well.
We did that dance sequence, and even just having his voice, come on, he does that, whatever, however you do it. I can't believe it.
You just tried to do it.
I just tried to do a Scooby impression, which is terrifying.
So yeah, like clearly a lot of the creative team were a lot more kind of comfortable with the property and with the roles by the time they did the second movie, which I think is part of the reason why, for me anyway, it holds up a little better than the first one.
Yeah.
There's also the fact that it kind of feels like a more, loving adaptation of the cartoon, not just because of the classic monsters, but like it sort of, follows the formula in the right ways, updates it in other ones, etc. Whereas the first one, while yes, it's a very nostalgic and funny movie, we still get a lot of enjoyment out of it. Like, the clashing creative visions are like very obvious.
Yeah.
It's just like, goofy slapstick juxtaposed with like low cut tops and Fred saying "biatch," It's
Fred says biatch.
He does. That one went over my head as a kid, I'll tell you. But obviously, we both really enjoy both movies. But if you had to ask me which of them do I think is just a good film, like more so than the other one, I would go with Scooby Doo 2, Monsters Unleashed, personally.
I'd agree. Both scripts are good, but I think Scooby Doo 2 Monsters Unleashed has a tighter one. There's more, the cast have gelled better, there's more chemistry, there's more creativity. Yeah, I think...
And it's more in keeping with the spirit of the franchise, in a way.
Yeah, and it feels a little bit less like a product. All films are products, and especially if they're based on a franchise, but, it's more like, this is a story. This is more a story in its own right.
Agreed. But yeah, all in all, I think we still enjoy those movies a lot.
Oh, yeah.
There's, there are flaws, there are issues. Some things haven't aged great. I doubt Fred's comment about getting to look at himself naked while in Daphne's body would fly in a post-Me Too climate, but...
And Sugar Ray would definitely not fly now.
Well, yeah. One hopes, anyway. But,
Oh, no, that's funny, because their biggest hit was, I Just Wanna Fly. Hey!
Okay. That one went over my head. Good work. You might say it flew over my head. We gotta stop.
So I guess if we were to just finish and summarise our thoughts, what would you say, Ross?
I would say they are flawed and inconsistent films, particularly the first one, that do suffer from, clashing sort of, production issues, creative clashes, and just a few early 2000s isms and whatnot. Though honestly, I think they hold up much better than Scoob does even like a year after its release, but I digress. But yeah, you know, they have issues certainly, and the tone can be a little bit whiplashy sometimes, but I think overall they are very much worthy additions to the franchise that have held up quite well, all things considered, and you know, have had a lasting impact, and particularly in the case of the second one, serve as very loving adaptations of their original source materials. So, warts and all, they're very fun movies that still do their job for me.
I would say that if you maybe haven't seen them in a while, and maybe the sort of cynical adultness made you think, oh no, they must be shit, give them another rewatch and you might be surprised to discover they're better than you remember.
Yeah, and you know, there are certain things, jokey jokes and queer subtext, that you might appreciate more as an adult, so that's a bonus.
Yeah, I feel like it should be said for all the tweets that are like, no one is born bi, you watch Scooby Doo at a formative age and the entire cast turns you bi.
As to fairly open bisexuals, can we confirm that?
I mean, look at us now.
Touche.
Or other tweets being like, the cast of Scooby Doo has aged like a fine wine.
Honestly, like, they're kind of way hotter now. And considering the impressionable impact that Velma's glow up and Scooby Doo 2 had on, you know, little Ross back in the day, considering that, like, they're all like unfairly attractive even now. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, Sarah Michelle Gellar basically looks the same.
Yeah.
Linda definitely looks older, but you know, she's aged very well, and
Yeah.
she is sort of an attractive middle-aged lady.
Yeah.
Is she
And
middle-aged? How old is she?
I feel like she's probably in her 40s.
Yeah.
You know,
Lillard, honestly, like,
looks a lot better now.
yeah, not that you necessarily looked bad in sort of, you know, circa Scream and Scooby Doo and whatever, but it's just like, damn no, he's a handsome older man. And ditto Freddie Prinze Jr. You know, he's maybe doesn't quite have the, you know, jock himbo appeal that he used to, but he's aged very gracefully by all accounts.
Agreed. Yeah. So yeah, this is the first episode of the K-Ghoul Scooby Reviews podcast.
Thank you for tuning in.
I think
anyone
you've
who listened.
I think you can get a good feel for what we're like.
If you listened to the whole thing, by the way, kudos, because if you get us talking about Scooby Doo, we will just go on forever.
Yeah, and you know, I think you get a feel for, if you did stay for the whole thing, you'll get a feel for what we like. We have a lot of nerdy tangents. We'll make things gay if we can, and we're very thirsty individuals.
Pretty much. Pretty much. So, yeah, I guess, you know, hopefully we'll do a few more of these, and please do tune in and follow us on YouTube and SoundCloud. As far as other platforms to find us on, Alice, do you want to plug anything? Your Letterboxd?
I'm not even down us on Letterboxd.
I think you're just Alice Beasley.
Okay, I'm just Alice Beasley, and it's a picture of,
Vincent Price with Kermit the Frog.
yes, that's how you can find me.
Cool. Well, I'll plug my Letterboxd, which is the slightly clunky handle of Ross Madison 6306. I think it was just an auto-generated thing. And you can follow me on Instagram at rossmad_edits, which is where I will plug, you know, kind of general life stuff and whatever creative things I'm working on, be they, you know, stuff like this, or my YouTube stuff, or, you know, actual commissioned film things, which I may or may not have in the works. So yeah.
Now, stay spooky, mystery lovers.
Yeah. Thank you for tuning in to the first episode, and happy Halloween. Bye.
Bye.